Today is National Sugar Addiction Awareness Day, October 30th. Interestingly enough, tomorrow, October 31st, is Halloween when we pass out candy. So I think it was made in response to that. And I wanted to talk about my own sugar addiction, food addiction. I was just talking to a client of mine about my alcohol and drug addiction, and I was mentioning about food as well. And I think it's very pertinent because we have the holiday of Halloween coming up, but I find so many people today are addicted to food and they don't really realize it, especially someone, me as a trainer. I'm trying to help people get their health fixed through the means of training and diet. And so by just trying to change things in their diet ignores some of these other underlying issues that are going on. Why do we use sugar or food as a coping mechanism? And that's where we end up with these addictions. It's not so much like, hey, I am just needing to get rid of these certain foods in my diet, and that's going to take care of my problem. That addiction is going to come out in other ways. And for some people, it's alcohol. For some people, it's drugs. For some people, it's food. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, I can't have a food addiction. Well, if you're overweight, you probably do have some form of it. Overweight, obese, all right, depending on the level. Because we should be eating at a level that is in balance with our body. But because now we have all these food products that make them taste really good, you might have now gotten into this sensation, and like a drug addiction, it hits these parts of your brain, and you start to use that as a way to help yourself feel better. When you don't have those things, you crave them and you want them, which is the physical addiction and the obsession in the mind. So you have these qualities of addiction, and it's really hard to break if you don't have. It's not just about the exercise and the food thing, like I was talking about as a trainer. There's this other aspect of mental health and these support systems that go along with, because there's a lot of distractions and there's a lot of things that get in the way. Think about it. If I was going to come into town and I'm a really good friend of yours and I haven't seen you in a long time, what are you going to do? You're going to go out to eat, right? A lot of times when we go out to eat, we eat too much food, right? A lot of places that we eat a lot of food, and we tend to have things like dessert, right? Everywhere you go out to eat and they say, what do you want for dessert? I remember for me, I thought I was supposed to have dessert at every meal. Every meal I was supposed to have dessert, not just every dinner. I would have it at lunchtime. I would always have sugary snacks, and that's where a lot of my addiction started. I packed a lunch and I could only eat so much at school. But when I got home, if those things were in there, I ate and I ate and I ate. And it was hard for me to not eat all of them. I couldn't because my parents only bought so many, but also it was like, okay, I had to save this box of things and I only had so many for me to eat. And it started to grow and started to grow. And then what happened later on in my life, I was smoking a ton of weed. And what I would do was, in regard to sugar addiction, I would wake and bake, right? So I would wake up in the morning on the weekends, right? When I didn't have work. And so I would wake up, I would smoke, and I would go to the store and I would just buy a bunch of candy, caramel corn and other snacks and chips and things like that. And I would just have all this sugar and all this crap food. And sugar addiction can also come in other forms. Like I said, overall food addiction might be a form of sugar addiction, but things like breads, pastas, cookies, candy is obviously sugar, chocolate, okay, ice cream, but any carbohydrate could also be a form of sugar addiction because it all breaks down into that. So for me, I would do that and I would just eat these foods all day long because I didn't have that stigma of, well, I have to hide it from my parents, or I have to hide I can't eat all of it because my parents are buying it. I can buy it for myself, and I can eat, if I want to eat 3 meals a day of just candy, I can, and I would sometimes. And then I would go through these periods of eating, binging, and then not eating anything, feeling sick to my stomach, and then not eating anything. So extremes, okay, eating. And that might not be you. You might be sitting there going, man, JD, you got a lot of problems. Yes, I agree. But there are different levels and different forms of addiction. An addiction is something that if you try to stop it, you cannot stop. And that could be something as simple as, like I said before, I have dessert after every meal. I just have my one dessert. I just have my one candy bar. I just have my one bowl of ice cream. I just have my one fill in the blank. I just have one, but you do it every single day. And I said to you, all right, you're not going to do it for a week. What would then happen? If you are sitting there thinking about it all the time, all right, craving it, wanting it, and that thing is a lot harder for you to say no to than you would think, you might have an addiction. And I think if we look at these problems more on that scale versus just discipline, right? A lot of times when I was first starting out in training and I looked at people and I said, they're just undisciplined. There's an aspect of that, of course. You have to first start with that discipline to change. But there might be more things going on than that. If I don't have any other coping mechanism, if I don't have any other thing in my life that I look forward to, when I want to eat my chocolate, my cookies, my ice cream, my whatever it is that I want, and I take that away, I'm going to be unhappy and I don't have anything. And what ends up happening is that pattern gets set in place where I feel fatigued, I feel tired, I feel upset, I feel happy. I use it as a thing to celebrate. I use it as a thing to make myself feel better. This is my tool that I use. If I don't have anything else, if I take that away and I don't have any other tools at my disposal, I am going to be craving that. I'm going to be wanting that sugar back in my life. That was my warm hug, okay? And for me, I had many different forms of addiction. I had the sugar, I had the alcohol, I had cocaine, I had weed. I've had a lot of different addictions, and it's all based on that same thing, that same sort of feeling of, hey, I want to change my state. I want to make myself feel better, and I need to look at an outside substance. I would say that there are many avenues that you can feel good. I'm exploring that for myself in sobriety. I have to find ways of feeling good without those things that literally destroy my life. Some people would say, oh, well, sugar addiction isn't that bad. At least you can't overdose on sugar. Not in one sitting you can't. But over time, what ends up happening, and this is why I think the sugar addiction awareness is very important, is, like I said, look at my life. It started as just a little snack here and there with lunch and with dinner. Then it became the routine of dessert. Every single meal that I had to have something sweet, something there at the end of my meal, even if I ate something healthy. You had to have something after. Then it turned into, okay, I can have more freedom with this thing. I can eat it whenever I want. I can go bananas on things. Then it turned into wake and bake. And of course that was coupled with marijuana. But when I got rid of marijuana and I could no longer smoke weed, I quit. I would still binge and I would still eat because I didn't have anything to fulfill me, okay? I didn't have anything. It was just discipline. Like I said, it's not necessarily just discipline that's going to get you through and keep you away from doing things that damage yourself or things that you don't like. I always felt so ashamed of overeating like that. I always felt ashamed of doing that. So if you have these feelings of shame along with it, coupled with the fact that it makes you feel good, it's a weird situation. Like a lot of alcoholics, they love alcohol. It makes them feel good, but they're so ashamed of the fact that they do that. They hide it from the people that are around them, and they hate the fact that of what they've become. And then what ends up happening is that's your baseline outside of it. When you're sober, when you're not eating the sugar, you have these feelings where you don't feel good. You feel shameful. You feel like you're less than. And it's not that simple of just getting rid of it. What else are you going to replace that with? How else are you going to feel good? And that's what I think some of the sugar addiction awareness can come about. That's why I'm talking about this is, hey, there's support for you and there's other ways. Meditation, breathing, getting in community, volunteering, giving of yourself. That's one of my best ways of me getting outside of myself and my own feelings is giving to people, listening to other people, being there for other people. I was just sharing, about my struggles, and then I hear about someone who's struggling with cancer, and it's like my difficulties pale in comparison to other people. And if I can be there for them, I forget myself and my problems, and I'm able to be of service to other people. That's a really powerful way for me. Exercise. I've taken exercise to the extreme, but for a lot of people, especially if you're not doing anything, going on a walk, you know how good you can feel? Being in nature, having a pet. There are so many different things that you could be doing instead of just using sugar as a way to make yourself feel better. But if I take away sugar from you and you don't have one of those tools at your disposal, or if you're just not even thinking of them, maybe because you've never used them before, because that was your only tool that you've used, you're not going to feel good. And then maybe you can make it a week, maybe you can make it a month. Sometimes I would go for months on end without binging, without drinking, without using. And then once I started again, it was right like where I started, right where I left off. Meaning once I started, I couldn't stop. Once you pop, you can't stop. Pringles, they have a slogan that says addiction. That's basically what once you pop, you can't stop means. They put on labels, you can't eat just one. These things are out there, and then the food companies, they design foods to make sure that you are getting the satisfaction that you want out of those foods. And so it makes it even harder now that you've had that and you've found some foods. If you find another food that hits all those sensations in you and you already have that food addiction, it makes it even harder for you to say no. I start off at the head, all right? I chop the head right off. I don't bring any of that stuff in my house. I don't start because I know if I start, I won't stop. So there's discipline on that end. But like I said, I can only be disciplined for so long. That only lasts for so long. What am I filling that space with? What am I filling that addiction with? God, prayer, that's a huge one for me. Being of service, meditation, breathing, exercise, walking, being in nature, being with animals, being with pets, being around other people, calling other people, watching, movies that make me feel good, all right? Shows, I've binged on shows. What do we call it? Binge watching. You can get addicted to those. Maybe that's another episode. I've been there as well. And that's also a problem. Hey, I'm going to fill one addiction with another. You want to try to find things that are neutral or positive. That's what I would say. That's my recommendation. Things to fill that space that aren't going to cause you with the shame and the guilt that you would associate with those binge eating things. And I know a lot of people might say, hey, look, JD, I don't steal. I don't cheat on my spouse. I don't do drugs. I don't do alcohol. I just like my chocolate. I just like my ice cream. I just like whatever. But like I was saying, over time, that can hurt you. Over time, you start to have type 2 diabetes. Over time, you start to have problems with your kidneys, problems with your liver, problems with the list goes on, especially as you start to gain weight. Me, I was someone that you never would tell that I had these addictions because I would go through periods of binging and purging. And I was always active, so I was always exercising. And my genetics are a certain way. But my insides, my liver, right, my pancreas, my body was not well. And so sometimes it's not just what you see on the outside. If you don't go to the doctor, you don't know what's actually really going on in yourself. And you might not want to know. But that's how you end up killing yourself with sugar over time. It's not like drug addiction and overdose, okay, and fatty. Well, actually, now we know that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is one of the number one growing diseases in our culture because of sugar. I probably should have led with that. That was a really, really good, interesting point. But that's part of what's going on, right? These things are killing you slowly over time, and you might not even really notice it. So that's why I think that this is a very, very good thing. I know that people are going to go wild on Halloween, and I would say, look, if you go wild, well, you can't stop, right? And if this is part of your everyday, then you might need to be looking at someone, like a nutritionist that also has a behavior coach that also understands addiction as well, an addiction specialist. Those are things that I would look at because it might not be so simple as just discipline. Like I said, for me, it's not necessarily about discipline. I can be very disciplined, but what happens when I don't have the positive, or like I said, neutral or positive means of coping with my everyday problems or with celebrations or with whatever? I used it in any scenario. I don't know how to make myself feel good because I don't feel good naturally. Again, that might be a greater question about why don't we feel well naturally. Do I have a connection with a higher power? For me, that's what I'm trying to lean into right now. If I don't have any of those things, what are some things that I could be doing that aren't damaging my body, whether it be short-term or long-term? Like I said, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, those things start to creep up on you, and they're happening a lot sooner in younger people now because of the food that we eat. What can you do that's not going to cause harm in your body, that's going to allow you to still feel good and move you in the direction that you want in life? So I think it's a very, very timely holiday or awareness day. And so sugar addiction, ask yourself those questions. Think about what I talked about today. Do you relate? Maybe you're not on that same scale, right? But maybe it's something that you do regularly. And if I took it away from you, you might say, I'm not very comfortable with this. Examine your own life. Maybe go on a little fast and test yourself and see. Maybe after Halloween, test yourself and see, am I really addicted to sugar? Is this guy, can I go without it? All right. And then are you white knuckling it? Are you just holding on for dear life just to get to 30 days or something like that? And then you go right back to it? Or is this something that you can find balance and say, yeah, I can have one or two and that's it. And I don't need it. All right. And as a matter of fact, I don't even want it. Well, prove it to yourself. So that's it for today. Until next time, I'll see you then.